So it's 2024 and you've decided to learn a new language this year, but you don't know where to get started. In this video, I'm going to be showing you tips on how to get started in learning a new language. This video is aimed more at people who are beginners in their language learning journey, but if you've been learning languages for a few years already and you're already a bit competent with a lot of the ways of how to learn a language, there may still be points in this video that you find useful. So we're going to go into the video with the first point I've jotted down, which is to make sure you pick the right language for you. Picking the right language for you means that you are genuinely interested in learning this language and no one else is going to push you into learning this language apart from yourself and the drive in order to go and study this language. It may be for a plethora of different reasons. For example, you enjoy the culture, the food, the people, the history, the geography of the country, or you may have heritage in the particular language. You could even have a partner who speaks that language. There are so many different reasons to learn a language, and if just one of those things gives you that little bit more of a motivation to learn one language over another, that could show that that could be the language that you want to learn. And if you really aren't sure, I would suggest spending a few days in the language that you think maybe you would like to learn. See how it feels. If it feels good, continue with it. If it doesn't feel good and you just don't quite like the sound of the language, or if there's any other reason why you don't enjoy it, move on to another language that you think you may enjoy more. Just experiment with different languages and see which ones just stick out to you. Everyone's different and therefore everyone have different goals and different reasons to learn different languages, so you don't have to just stick with the mainstream languages. You can decide to learn a more obscure language if that's something that interests you deep down. But make sure you find a language, for whatever reason it is, that you are genuinely passionate about and that you would like to learn. Do understand that when you're learning a language, it will take a long time to show results. And because it takes a long time to show results, if you're planning on learning a language in 2024, I would recommend to focus more on the areas of language learning that are going to be important to you and more on the areas that you want to improve. Typically in languages, a language is broken down into 4 sections: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. If you want to improve your speaking ability so you can speak with native people, you need to practice speaking. You need to practice speaking more than your reading or your writing, for example. So if you want to, at the end of the year, have any kind of speaking ability, you need to make sure that you open your mouth and physically speak every single day that you're studying this language to give you the best opportunity in order to learn how to speak the language. If it is speaking that you want to improve, then you can find tutors on programs such as italki, Preply, or any one of the other programs that are out there. There's quite a few out there now. You can also use HelloTalk and Tandem, which are free apps which you can use to text people in your target language and they can text back because they're trying to learn your native language. They're really good app services. You can even do voice notes and you can do like FaceTiming features and stuff like that on there. They can correct where you make mistakes. So they're a really good way if you want to connect with people. But also do not forget that if you want to speak, you can literally speak to yourself in the mirror. You can record yourself speaking. You can watch it back to then see how fluidly you speak or how, if you made mistakes. You can do so many different things when it comes to speaking. You don't always necessarily need to speak with a native speaker, although I will say speaking with native speakers is going to be one of the more efficient ways of learning a language. But you can do, in the time that you don't have someone to speak to, you can always speak to yourself as well. But of course, if you want to get good at reading in a language and you don't care about speaking the language and you just want to read because you want to learn Russian to read the Russian poetry, for example, then just get reading. Buy books and read books. Focus on just reading a lot, and over time you will start to pick up more and more vocabulary, and over time you will get to a point of where you will be proficient in reading. Trust me when I say that you can be proficient in reading but still very basic in your speaking and listening skills. If you want to be good at writing, again, just write a lot. Whatever skill in the reading, speaking, writing, and listening sections that you want to be good at, you need to practice those sections a lot. If you want to be good at all 4 of them, you're going to need to put in a lot of work in order to actually be good at all 4 of them equally. Normally, there will be one that will be slightly better than the others. It's a very weird phenomenon if you've never learned a language before, but when you learn a language, you will soon find out that you can be very good at one section and very not so good at another, and that's because you need to put in more time into the one that you're struggling with. When you've decided whether you want to focus on reading, writing, listening, or speaking, and then you consume content that's going to be useful for you to pick up vocabulary, you want to make sure that you focus on content that is comprehensible, meaning that when you read the book or listen to the audio, you're going to understand more than you don't understand. You want to understand at first maybe 50 to 60% of the content, and then you want to improve upon that, and then understand 80 to 90% of that content, and you want to gradually just improve your comprehension over time. If you're struggling to find something that you can comprehend, I would recommend starting basic. You are a beginner in the language, therefore you are essentially a baby in the language. Start off with children material or material aimed at babies and just go from there. You want to build up these foundational blocks in order to progress yourself in the language to then get to a more proficient stage in your language learning journey. But everyone starts off at the beginning knowing absolutely nothing, and then over time you will learn new words, new phrases, new grammatical points. So make sure that you focus on content that you can actually comprehend the majority of things in there, or at least content that if you don't at first comprehend much of, it's not too big where you can just study it, spend an hour just to look up all the words, and then hopefully you can comprehend it in a few days time from now. And while we're on that topic, trying to make sure that you find content that is also fun. It's a lot better for you if you're studying something that you actually enjoy. If you're reading a kid's book, I understand it may not be fun for an adult, but once you've progressed from the early stages and you start to have a better understanding of vocabulary in general, and you read kind of more complicated material, you have more options to choose from, whether you read an article from Google or whether you read from a graded reader book or whatever it may be. Try to find things that you're genuinely interested in, and you're not going to worry too much about if it's a little bit more difficult, because you're interested in trying to understand the message of the material that you're trying to comprehend. For me personally, when I go on Google, I'll Google in the language that I'm trying to learn, and I'll find articles based on things that I am also trying to learn or that I just want to read up about. You want to read a review about a game or a TV series or a musical band that you like to listen to, or whether you like to learn a new skill and you want to just learn that skill in a different language. It is completely up to you what you want to read about and what you find fun, but if you make sure that you read topics and if you listen to topics that are interesting to you, you're going to be more likely to actually show up and do that language, because it's going to be more fun to you and you're going to actually get something out of it apart from just the language itself. You're going to also learn about what's written in the actual article itself. So I've already touched on this a little bit, but make sure you find time to speak the language, especially if you're focusing on actually wanting to meet people and speak with them in person. A language partner is going to be a very beneficial thing for you to do if you want to learn to speak a language, and also it's going to make that language feel more real and more alive. If I never connect with someone who speaks the language that I'm trying to learn, then it doesn't really feel like I'm ever going to get anywhere. But as soon as I sit down and speak to someone and I struggle and I do my best to speak the language that I'm trying to learn, all of a sudden I get this boost of euphoria, because it's like I'm putting all this study and practice into use, and the person I'm speaking to understands the noises that I'm making and they respond to me. And there's something to the fact that when you communicate to someone in the language that you're trying to learn, there's just some like really happy feeling in you that just makes you want to continue, and it's essentially your boost of motivation to say, hell yeah, I actually completed something that I thought previously was really difficult, or if not difficult, like near impossible. Make sure you also understand if there are points where you do your best in a particular day and your language learning is just not working and you just feel like you've forgotten everything. Make sure you understand that even on those days, you are bettering yourself every single day. When you look at day 1 and you know absolutely nothing of a language, and then you look at day 10, and then you look at day 50, and then day 100. If you look at your progression over time, then you will see that you indeed do improve over time. You go from knowing absolutely nothing to knowing a few sentences to knowing how to form words, and you may know new grammar patterns, and you may know a word or two now that you didn't know a few weeks ago. And you basically want to make sure that you always recognize when you improve in your language, and just make sure that you realize that yes, right now I am better than what I was last week or last month, and right now, even though I may not feel like I'm better than what I was, I am indeed still improving, because there will be times when you plateau or that you feel like you plateau, but during these plateau moments you still are going to improve if you just keep up with your language learning. Make sure not to rely on any one language learning resource, whether it be a grammar book or a particular book that you're reading at the moment, or whether it be a language learning app, music, a podcast, whatever it may be. do not rely on just one source. You want to make sure you vary your sources and learn the language from many different places, because if I read something in a book and then I look up in my grammar book for confirmation on what it is that I've read to make sure that I understand what I've read, or if I watch a YouTube video describing about it, if I don't have a grammar book, or if I listen to some music and they repeat a phrase that I've heard in some other context, or if I read something on Link or whatever else it may be, all of these different phrases and words that I see in different contexts all of a sudden start to make more sense because I see them in different sentences, and therefore I can start to get more of a generalized idea of what this word means, whether it has one connotation. It could connote to more than 3 or 4 different things. Some languages, some words are very flexible. It could mean like many different things in English if it was a direct translation. So in those particular circumstances, you want to make sure you look at different resources to make sure you've got a full picture of what these particular words mean, and just words and phrases in general. It's going to be a lot more useful for you than just sticking to one resource. If you stick to just Duolingo for a really generic example, you're not going to get very far. Please don't stick to just Duolingo, by the way. While I'm on the topic, do make sure that you look into other things as well. Sticking to Duolingo will not get you anywhere really in your language learning journey, in my experience, and that's what I would suggest personally. But the case is very much true if you stick to any one language learning app, any one textbook, any one resource in general. Make sure that you have a few different resources at hand. Do not overdo the resources, but just make sure you have multiple. Make sure that you utilize YouTube when it comes to learning your language, and whatever else it may be that you're wanting to learn. Just make sure that you're looking at different resources, because it also varies the content that you're learning. On the topic of grammar books, or just grammar in general, please do not overdo the grammar. Please do not overthink about the grammar. Please do not worry about the grammar. This book is quite thick. I don't know how many pages, but you can see roughly how thick it is. It's not even an extensive Polish grammar guide. It's just basically covering the more important side of the grammar. There are still probably other grammar points that's not included in this book. And so it could be a lot thicker. It could be a lot more dense in the knowledge that's inside that book. Do not worry about the grammar too much. Do not overthink it. And in fact, I would recommend for almost every single person when they begin not to even look at grammar for the first like 6 months to a year while they're studying a language, or maybe even longer than that. And the reason is that grammar isn't going to make a lot of sense to you until you know part of the language, or like a decent amount of the language. If I looked at Polish grammar before I started learning Polish, like the amount of demotivation that would have given me would have probably been enough for me to say, actually, I'm out, because I just don't know if I would ever be able to understand all this. And the truth could even be said for Spanish, where there's like 17 or so different tenses, and therefore a verb could be conjugated in so many different ways. And also, people normally worry about the whole masculine feminine thing. Honestly, that's one of the more simpler side of grammar, in my opinion, especially in the Romance languages. And obviously, like, grammar is just so dense and it's so complex in certain languages more than others, that if you worry about grammar straight away, like, there's just no way you're going to actually learn. You're going to learn how to maybe conjugate, but then you're not going to learn how to just use these words. It's way better just to learn sentences and words as you go along, especially if you're reading. Reading is one of the best ways, in my opinion, to learn a language. So if you read words and sentences and you learn phrases, you're going to learn those conjugated forms of verbs and different change forms of words within languages such as Polish, where nouns and adjectives constantly change their form as well. You're going to learn the different forms just through immersion, basically, and through seeing these words a lot, and through seeing them in particular contexts that you want to speak about. And so essentially, learn a phrase, and then you don't need to worry about how to conjugate that word. You already know the phrase. And then when it comes to speaking with someone, if you do get something wrong, they can just correct you anyway, and then you're like, oh, okay, so that's how I say it, so I'll say it like this from now on, or at least try to remember to say it like that. By all means, feel free to look at the grammar if you wish to. I'm not saying that it's a definite, like, do not go to, but I would recommend not to focus too much of your time on grammar. If you really want to like do some kind of grammar study, I would recommend to stick to something like 80% in just reading and enjoying the language, and then that 20% looking at grammar, or something along those lines. But as a beginner, really try and make sure that you focus less on grammar and just more on absorbing the language and enjoying the language for what it is, and worry about grammar a little bit later on in your journey when you've already got examples of different grammar points, so that when you learn about a particular grammar point, you can say to yourself, oh, I saw that in a particular sentence, and so that's how it works, and so when I use this from now on, I will understand because I'll refer back to this particular sentence that I have kind of attached with the grammar point. I think some people get so strung up on grammar that they spend like 90% or 100% of their time studying a language just in a grammar book, and that is one of the least efficient ways to learn a language. And also for a lot of people doing that, they don't even find that fun. If you don't find it fun, do not do it, essentially, is the main message of this. If you're not finding it fun, just stop. As in, if you've decided to learn a language for 30 minutes a day and that's kind of your goal, and one day you're reading or you're studying the language whatever way you're doing it, and you just decide that actually today I just can't be bothered, I really don't have the motivation, or whatever it may be, you just don't feel as motivated, then it's fine to say that, okay, I've only done 10 minutes today, I'm going to just stop here, I'm not going to reach my half an hour goal today, but tomorrow I'm going to pick back up and just continue again. Or maybe later on that day, you may find some extra motivation to do the remaining 20 minutes. If you force yourself to hit a particular goal of 30 minutes or 1 hour every single day, eventually you may burn out and you will start to associate language learning with the times when it's not as fun for you to learn. So if you even just spend 5 or 10 minutes and then after that 5 or 10 minutes you start to just get a bit bored or not as much enjoyment out of this particular activity in the language, it's completely fine to stop and just say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to pick back up. Because it's way better, I think, just to enjoy all the moments in your language learning journey rather than enjoying like 60% and then the other 40% was kind of forced just to make up for those hours. But I will say as well, just try not to make this an excuse to be lazy. There's a difference between being lazy and forcing yourself in order to actually be productive, and then just not having the motivation and genuinely just being bored and not finding it fun, and forcing yourself to a point of where you're just burned out and you don't want to learn this language anymore because you just associate the language with being like not that fun, which is what a lot of people associate French or a particular language that they may have learned at school. For me, it was French. And for many years, I just didn't want to learn French because of bad experiences or just bored experiences at school. And many years later, I studied French on my own and I then found some kind of beauty in the language and I actually really enjoy the language now. But for a long time, I didn't enjoy it, and that kind of put me off of learning French for a long time. So make sure that the time spent in the language, you're just enjoying yourself for what it is. And also note that it's completely fine to take a break when you're studying a language if you need to take a day or two off of your language learning. But just remember that obviously you need to be consistent in your language learning. So try not to take too long off of studying language, but it's certainly healthy to take breaks when you need them, just to kind of re-establish a base again for you to continue studying your language at a consistent and steady pace. Sometimes even after taking a small break, you return back to the language, you will feel way more refreshed, and you may even feel like you're better at the language today than what you was 4 days ago when you took that break, because you were just so overwhelmed at that point and you've taken a small break and you just refresh yourself. It's like taking a holiday from your normal day-to-day job. You go back to your job and you probably feel more refreshed because you've taken that time off. As I mentioned a minute ago, make sure to stay consistent with your language learning. A little bit every single day is going to be way better than like a whole bunch of study in 1 day out of 7 days a week. So rather than doing like say 4 hours on a Sunday once a week, you want to make sure you do like half an hour every single day of the week, or however much you can commit to doing. And even if you start at just 15 minutes a day, there may be a few days where you decide I've got more time today, and so I'll do 15 minutes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but on a Thursday I can actually do like an hour, and on Friday, Saturday, Sunday I'm back to 15 or 20 minutes, or however much you can commit to it. It's fine to give an extra day or two more time if you can do it, but make sure you're consistent as you can be. Every single day you want to show up and do something in that language. Ideally you want to do it at least for half an hour a day, but at least if you do something in that language, even if it's just as minimal as reading like a sentence in your target language from a social media post, which is almost nothing towards your language learning, but at least if you see the language every single day, it's going to prompt you to be more motivated. You're going to continue having that language fresh in your brain. If you don't do this, if you don't stay consistent, and if you just drop off essentially, you very easily can forget a lot of what you've learned in the language. Although if you pick the language back up, it's then kind of intuitive in a way to like relearn everything that you've learned depending on what level you was. But you want to make sure you just stay consistent in that you're studying the language every single day unless of course you're on some kind of small break. But again, don't make that break too long of a period of time. You want to be consistent, and if you're not spending time in the language, remember you won't be learning that language. On days where you have less motivation, just remember why you started learning this language in the first place. It's always good to sort of remind yourself, I want to learn this language actually because I want to speak to a friend of mine in their native language, or my partner, or I want to learn this language because I do want to learn the literature of this particular country, or I want to learn ancient Greek because of this reason, or there's so many different reasons why you may have that motivation to learn a language. And if you just remind yourself every now and then when your motivation is lower, then it's going to help you just sort of get through those sort of low motivation periods. And some days you'll just wake up with a higher motivation to say, you know, today I'm going to tackle this and I'm going to do my best to actually learn what I need to learn. So make sure you remind yourself when you need to about the reasons of why you want to learn a particular language. And the last point that I've got here on my list is to set realistic goals. Setting realistic goals is very good because essentially if you set goals that are either too vague or just too grand, you will feel like you're always too far away from that goal. If you set realistic goals and you achieve these realistic goals, there's going to be a sense of accomplishment. Therefore, you then are going to be more likely to continue in studying the language. A realistic goal in your language learning journey could be something like read 10 pages in a book every day for a week. You read 10 pages every day for a week, that's your goal complete. You can kind of then progress to reading a chapter. And then once you've read a chapter, you read the second chapter, or just stuff like that, which are achievable. And once you've achieved them, you can set yourself a new goal. Maybe the new goal is slightly harder, but it's still very much achievable. Or your goal even could be something as simple as learning a certain vocabulary in a certain topic in the language you're trying to learn. Because if you're learning a language and you want to speak about some topics over other topics, you want to learn about the topics you want to talk about. It's no point really learning the vocabulary as a beginner about topics that you don't think you'll talk about or that you won't come across, because what's the point if you're not going to use those words in the language? You want to learn topics of interest and therefore topics that you want to talk about. So if you want to talk about going to the gym or technology or engineering or politics, make sure you look at those particular topics, read about those topics, try and jot down some words that you want to learn within those topics that are very specific to the particular topic that they are within. And your goal could be something as simple as get more confident in speaking about politics in the language that I'm trying to learn, or whatever topic it is that you would like to speak about. There are so many different goals you could set yourself, and essentially just make sure that those goals are achievable. Once you've hit those goals, you will feel that burst of motivation because you've just achieved something and you've got to a point in the language that you previously didn't think you could get at. Overall, language learning is a really awesome and fun hobby to pick up, and I really hope that this video has helped you out at least even just a little bit. If you have any other questions about learning languages or in general, I have a bunch of videos on this channel, or if you'd like to ask in the comment section, I will do my best to get around to answering comments. Let me know, regardless of all that, what languages you are learning this year in the comment section down below. It's very interesting for me to see what kind of languages my followers and viewers are learning this year. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I appreciate you all for getting this far in the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in studying languages and tips for learning languages and all things language learning related. Thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you all in another one. Until then, have a great day and peace out. Bye bye.